Two mornings. Same person. 2 years apart. First morning. The alarm goes off at 6:47. Before she sits up, before she brushes her teeth, before she does anything, she opens her bank account. Not because she's expecting something, just because. The number is $340. Rent is in 6 days. She closes the app, gets up, makes coffee, and for the next 14 hours, somewhere in the back of her mind, a calculation is running. Quiet, constant, never fully off. Second morning. The alarm goes off at 6:47. She opens her bank account. The number is $23,400. She looks at it for about 2 seconds, closes the app, gets up, makes coffee. And then something different happens. Nothing. No calculation, no quiet dread, no mental arithmetic about which thing comes out when and whether the timing works. Just coffee. Just Tuesday morning. Just the ordinary, unremarkable experience of being a person who is not afraid of her own bank account. The number changed, obviously, but here's the part that took her completely by surprise. The day she stopped worrying about money didn't feel like winning. It didn't feel like a finish line or a milestone or a moment she'd want to frame. It felt like silence, like a noise she'd been living with so long she'd stopped hearing it, until the day it stopped and she finally understood how loud it had been. My name is Salim, and today we're talking about the most underrated milestone in personal finance. Not the first million, not retirement, not financial independence. The specific, quiet, ordinary day when you open your bank account and feel nothing. No anxiety, no dread, no math, just information. Because that day is real. It arrives for real people living real lives on real incomes, and almost nobody talks about what actually causes it or what threatens to undo it once it arrives. Before we talk about the day it stops, we need to talk about what it actually is. Because financial stress is one of those things that's so common, so normalized, so thoroughly woven into the experience of being an adult in America that most people have stopped registering it as a problem. It's just the weather, just how it feels to be alive and responsible for your own financial life. But it is not nothing, and the research on what it actually costs is one of the more disturbing things I've read while putting this video together. Meet Daniel. He's 29. He works in IT support for a mid-sized company in Columbus, Ohio. He earns $58,000 a year, which sounds like a livable salary until you run the actual monthly numbers. After taxes, he takes home about $3,600. Rent for a one-bedroom, $1,050. Car payment and insurance, $480. Groceries, $340. Utilities, $160. Phone and internet, $120. Student loans, $280. Health insurance, $135. That's $2,565 in fixed costs, leaving Daniel with $1,035 a month, which sounds like margin until you remember that $1,035 is also his car repair fund, his medical copay fund, his clothing budget, his social life, his everything unexpected fund. There is no category for the unexpected because the unexpected doesn't get a category. It just arrives and takes from whatever is there. And here's what $1,035 of actual margin feels like to live with. It feels like checking the balance before you confirm the dinner reservation, not because you can't afford dinner, because you need to verify. It feels like a low hum of awareness that follows you through every transaction. Not loud, not paralyzing, just present, always present. The way a car with a slightly misaligned wheel pulls just enough to remind you it needs attention, every mile, every turn, never letting you fully forget. It feels like a specific kind of fatigue that has nothing to do with how much you slept. The mental overhead of constant low-level financial calculation is exhausting in a way that doesn't show up on any diagnostic and doesn't get any sick days. Princeton researchers Sendhil Mullinoffen and Eldar Shaffi put numbers to this in their research on scarcity. They found that financial worry consumes cognitive bandwidth, measurably, significantly, in ways that impair performance on completely unrelated tasks. The cognitive load of managing financial stress is equivalent in their testing to losing approximately 13 IQ points. 13 points. Not from a medical condition, not from sleep deprivation, from the ongoing mental overhead of not having enough financial buffer. And it doesn't stay in the financial domain. Daniel is less sharp in his 2 p.m. meetings because part of his brain is quietly running numbers about the car registration due next month. He's less present in conversations with his girlfriend because somewhere beneath the surface, he's calculating whether the weekend trip she mentioned is something he can make work. He's less creative, less focused, less fully himself. Not dramatically, not in ways anyone would name, just slightly, constantly, in the way that a background noise makes everything else slightly harder to hear. The American Psychological Association has run an annual Stress in America survey for over 15 years. Money has ranked as the #1 source of stress for Americans in almost every single year. Not work, not relationships, not health. Money. 57% of Americans say financial stress affects their physical health. 44% say it affects their productivity at work. 40% say it damages their personal relationships. And a 2023 Federal Reserve survey found that 37% of American adults would be unable to cover an unexpected $400 expense with cash or its equivalent. $400. One car repair, one urgent care visit, one plane ticket to get home for a family emergency. 37% of American adults are $400 from financial crisis at any given moment. And the stress of living $400 from crisis doesn't stay in the category of money. It spreads, it seeps into sleep, into focus, into relationships, into the simple experience of moving through a day without dread. Daniel lives here, and the thing about living here is that after enough time, you stop noticing the noise. You adapt to it. You get good at functioning with the background calculation always running. You develop workarounds and mental shortcuts and a practiced calm that looks like coping, but is actually just compression. The noise doesn't go away. You just get better at not hearing it consciously, until the day it stops, and then you realized you'd been hearing it for years.
Here's what most financial content gets wrong about the day financial stress disappears. They treat it like an income event. Get to a certain salary and the worry stops. Cross a certain number and the anxiety lifts. That is not how it works. Income is a necessary ingredient, but it is not the mechanism. And understanding the actual mechanism is the difference between reaching a salary milestone and having it change nothing, and reaching a salary milestone and actually feeling the silence. There are 3 specific things that make financial stress go quiet, not simultaneously, not overnight, but in sequence, one building on the next, until one ordinary Tuesday morning, the calculation just isn't running. The first thing is the emergency fund. Not the concept, the actual fund, sitting in an account doing nothing. The emergency fund is the most boring, most repeated, most universally ignored piece of personal finance advice in existence. And the reason people don't have it is not that they don't know about it. It's that at the income levels where financial stress is worst, building one while also covering all fixed costs is mathematically very hard, sometimes impossible, and takes long enough that it feels abstract for most of the time you're building it. But here's what the research actually shows about what an emergency fund does psychologically once it exists. A 2022 study published in the Journal of Financial Planning found that households with 3 or more months of expenses in liquid savings reported significantly lower financial anxiety scores, independent of income level. Not because the money made them rich, because the money made uncertainty survivable. The psychological function of an emergency fund is not to pay for emergencies, it's to remove the specific fear that an emergency will be catastrophic. It converts the unexpected from a crisis into an inconvenience, and that conversion, that single specific change in the risk profile of being alive, is responsible for more of the silence Daniel is eventually going to feel than any other single factor. When Daniel finally builds his emergency fund, 9 months of grinding, of not buying the things he wanted to buy, of watching the number in a separate high-yield savings account grow toward $10,800, the morning after it crosses that threshold, he opens his bank account and feels something slightly different. Not dramatically, just slightly. The edge is a little less sharp. The calculation runs a little quieter. He's not out of the woods yet, but he's bought himself survivability, and survivability is the foundation that everything else is built on. The second thing is income stability, predictability, not just amount. This one surprises people. The research consistently shows that income volatility causes stress independent of income level. A person earning $70,000 a year from freelance work with unpredictable monthly variance reports higher financial anxiety than a person earning $55,000 a year from a stable salaried position. Because the brain doesn't actually manage money, it manages risk, And unpredictable income is a risk management nightmare regardless of the average amount, because the average doesn't tell you whether this specific month is going to be $4,800 or $9,200, and your rent doesn't care about your average. Daniel's situation improves not just when his income goes up, but when it becomes reliable, when he knows with high confidence that a specific number is arriving on the 1st and the 15th, the background calculation changes character. It's no longer predicting, it's accounting. And accounting is much less stressful than predicting. The third thing, and this is the one that actually produces the silence, is the moment your fixed costs stop chasing your income. This is where lifestyle inflation becomes the central character in the story. Because here's what happens to most people when income rises. The fixed costs follow. The nicer apartment because now you can. The newer car because the old one felt like the old version of you. The subscriptions, the memberships, the restaurants, the weekend trips, the wardrobe that finally reflects how you'd like to be seen. None of it is wrong. All of it is human. Every individual decision is completely reasonable. Together, they rebuild the original tightness at a higher altitude. The day financial stress disappears is not the day income crosses a number. It's the day the gap between income and fixed costs becomes wide enough and stable enough that the buffer can exist and grow without being constantly threatened. For Daniel, that day arrives at 33. He's earning $82,000, his fixed costs are $3,200, his take-home is $5,100, the gap is $1,900, and critically, he doesn't let the gap close. He automates $800 into his 401k, he automates $500 into a brokerage account, he keeps $600 as actual discretionary spending, and the emergency fund sits at $15,000, fully funded, untouched, doing its only job, existing. One Wednesday morning in March, the check engine light comes on. He calls the shop, $950 to fix. He schedules the appointment. He does not check his bank account before scheduling the appointment. He does not calculate which other thing this month doesn't happen now. He does not feel the familiar tightening. He just schedules the appointment, and then he goes back to work. That's the moment. Not a champagne moment, not a milestone he posts about, just a Wednesday morning where a $950 problem was a problem and not a crisis. And the difference between those two things is the whole story.
Here's the thing I need you to really sit with, because it runs counter to almost everything the financial content machine wants you to believe. The day you stop worrying about money doesn't look like what you've been imagining. It doesn't look like a specific account balance on a screen. It doesn't look like a house or a car or a vacation. It doesn't arrive with any external signal at all. It arrives on a completely ordinary morning when you check your account and feel nothing, and then realize, slowly, that the nothing is new. That for years the same action produced a background hum of anxiety so familiar you'd stopped registering it. And now the hum is gone. Wealth, at its most fundamental level, is not luxury. It is the silence of a specific stress. The research makes this concrete. Killingsworth and Kahneman's landmark joint study, published in 2023 after a decade of disagreement between the two researchers, found that for most people, happiness continues rising with income well past any plateau. But what drives that rising is not the acquisition of nicer things. It's the reduction of negative emotion. Financial security reduces fear. It reduces the low-grade dread. It returns cognitive bandwidth. And the return of that bandwidth, the silencing of the background calculation, shows up in well-being data as significantly as almost any other variable they measured. The absence of financial stress is itself a form of wealth. And most people who reach the luxury version of wealth without the silence version are still, in every way that actually matters neurologically, not wealthy. This is not abstract. The Goldman Sachs survey data found that 40% of households earning $100,000 to $150,000 live paycheck to paycheck. 40% of households earning $500,000 or more live paycheck to paycheck. The income doubled, tripled, quintupled, and 40% of people at every one of those levels rebuilt the tightness, rebuilt the calculation, rebuilt the noise, because they got the income without building the structure. They crossed the threshold and immediately used the new margin to install a new, higher floor of expenses. And now they need every dollar again, just to maintain a more expensive version of the same financial fragility. Daniel almost does this. At 33, when the gap finally opens up, there's a version of him that moves to the nicer apartment in the better neighborhood, that gets the car he's wanted since 2019, that says yes to the things he spent years saying no to. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things individually. But he's seen the math. He knows what the gap is actually worth if he protects it. He knows that $1,900 a month invested consistently from age 33 becomes something extraordinary by age 60. Not because he's special, because time and margin and an index fund are a machine that runs whether you're paying attention or not, but only if you don't take the margin back. So he makes one decision. He decides the gap is the goal. Not the bigger apartment, not the better car, the gap. The distance between what comes in and what leaves automatically. That distance, protected and growing, that's what produces the silence he felt on the Wednesday morning with the check engine light. And he decides that silence is worth more than anything he could spend the margin on. Here's the final thing I want you to understand about the day financial stress disappears. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It doesn't arrive dramatically. It arrives the way dawn arrives, gradually, incrementally, and then all at once when you look up and realize the dark is gone. The emergency fund makes the first dent. The edge softens slightly. The income stability makes the second dent. The prediction anxiety quiets. The protected gap makes the third. The calculation slows, then stops. And one ordinary morning, on a day with no particular significance, you open your phone, you look at the number, and you feel nothing. Just information. Just Tuesday. Just coffee. And if you've been carrying the noise for long enough, that nothing will feel like the most significant thing that has happened to you in years.
So here's what everything today adds up to. The day you stop worrying about money is not a wealth event. It is a structure event. It is the day the three things align: the buffer that makes uncertainty survivable, the income that arrives predictably, and the gap that is wide enough and protected enough that the math stops being a threat and starts being a tool. It is available at incomes most people would not call rich. It is unavailable at incomes most people would call wealthy if the structure isn't there. The number on the paycheck is not the variable. The gap is. The gap is always the variable. Here's what I want you to do right now before you close this. 3 things. 1, look at your fixed costs. Everything that leaves your account, whether you choose it or not. 2, look at your take-home. 3, look at the gap. If the gap is negative, that's where the work starts. On the cost side, the income side, or both. If the gap is positive, but you can't remember what's happening to it, that's where the work starts, on the structure side. Because the gap doesn't automatically become the emergency fund and the brokerage account and the silence on a Wednesday morning in March. You have to build the pipeline. You have to automate it before the lifestyle expands to consume it. The silence is real. It arrives for real people. It is not reserved for people who earn extraordinary amounts of money. It is reserved for people who built the structure that the money flows through, and then protected that structure when every human instinct said to spend. Build the structure. Protect the gap, and one ordinary morning, for no dramatic reason at all, you'll open your phone, look at the number, and feel nothing. That nothing is everything. If this video changed how you think about what you're actually building toward, hit like and subscribe. Next time, we're going to talk about exactly how to build the structure, account by account, automation by automation, so that morning actually arrives.